before we go live, Dave.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of my plan. And we are live on Friday. Friday. Come on, I turned my volume off.
Come on.
And it's on. Sorry about that, guys.
All right,
I
here we go.
went to another place before we ever got fired up, and I was sure that it was off. And obviously, I'm badly mistaken. But that doesn't change anything. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's
Hello.
Friday or drama. Yes, Scott?
Hello.
Oh, that was a hello. Okay. Hang on. I've got to get rid of the disguise. The cops are gone. Now I can see things. And for that adjustment on my system, there we go. Now I can do all the things I'm supposed to do.
Excellent. So welcome, everyone.
Welcome indeed. I don't want to go see everybody yet. I have lots of things to do, and then we'll go check in with everybody that's around.
All right, sounds good.
Good. Let me see something here.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, let's get fired up here. Get the ephemera out of the way.
Okay.
So this is Pi Day Friday drama. Dave Rush Ask Me Anything and Scott dramas. We do this every Friday, 2 o'clock Central Time, for up to 2 hours, depending on how long projects take and how many questions you have. I am the senior instructor at Total Seminars, and this is a Total Seminars production. Mike Myers, our writer-in-chief and president and all-around cool guy, has kindly dedicated this time of Total Seminars to us to be able to bring you the Raspberry Pi as a tool to add to your learning in the CompTIA environment and to just have some general learning and fun. Of course, I'm joined as always by my partner in Pi. I wrote that last night. Scott Jernigan.
Hi, I'm Scott Jernigan, editor-in-chief for Total Seminars and one of the primary authors and instructors as well for our company. I've been working with Mike Myers for a couple of decades, intimately involved with all of his books and videos and all of that stuff as contributor, sometimes co-author, and author in my own right. So that's who I am. And of course, we have Dave. And
the word intimately and Mike in the same sentence ran chills down my spine, but I know that Tullowit's going to key on it, so I wanted to get there first.
Oh, Tullowit's already going deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, trust me, no makeup. I'll explain it shortly, but the short answer, you can see I've changed the set. So it's kind of changed the whole coloration of the way things happen here.
Sorry. I'm catching the comments in the stream and they're cracking me up.
I'm not even going to look yet. Checking for my goodies. Or, okay, so let's do this part. Well, again, the mechanics to get those cleared out of the way. I'm doing a little screen sharing here.
Okay.
So Scott and I are here every Friday. Scott and I are always working in the backgrounds on the day-to-day Mike AMAs. If you have a question for us, we want you to post it here today. We're going to try and hit it. But if it's a long answer or if it's something that you don't want to post on the public forum, we would like you to contact us via email, which you can do me at davar@totalsem.com or scottj@totalsem.com. If you want to get in touch with me by my personal email, you're welcome to do so. drushtx, that would be Dave Rush, Texas at Yahoo. Send to one, send to the other. Don't send to both because they're cross-linked and, they'll talk to each other. If you find us gaming, you might identify me as Blood Rush TX. I did get back into a little bit of Borderlands last week on my laptop here because I just have not gotten around to building back the big monster. It's a simple fix, but there's so much more to do. You'll find Scott as Scarheart without the E over here. And if it's an emergency, I've got to talk to Scott. Call this number. It will go to one of our people. And if you can convince them that you need a personal, immediate conversation with them, they will find a way to get you in touch. You could do the same attempt with me. I'm harder to catch. You know what? I don't think I'm harder to catch on weekends. Scott's a pretty busy guy when we're not doing this. Writing Sec Plus and making Sec Plus Sims. I wonder if Andre's in yet.
Had to get that dig in, right, Dave? Thanks.
Well, Andre might not be here. I'll leave this one for you.
All right. So just because you're here and we're all kind of sheltering in place from the COVID virus and taking this time to further our learning of CompTIA, A+, Net+, Security Plus, or whatever you're working on right now, or just hanging out, learning some cool tech. Just for you guys, we have our weekly specials. So the deal this week is 50% off all of the A+ and Network Plus super bundles. Those are the videos, practice tests, and simulations. The simulations are for getting you prepared for the performance-based questions on A+ and Net+. We also have the Security Plus video and Total Tester bundles, 50% off. You just use the code MMLive Labor Day at TotalSim.com checkout, and you'll get an amazing, amazing deal.
They really are amazing. We're already cheaper than everybody, and now you take 50% off of cheaper than everybody, and you've got something to talk about. I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's all I want to do for the de rigueur stuff we have to do. If you had an in-depth question and post your questions. Okay, so I got a lot to do today. We're going to get through it all. And of course, the big project is going to be Pi-hole. Now, it's going to take us a good bit of time to go through Pi-hole, but I want you to know that once you've seen it one time, and even if you haven't seen it one time, it's a very, very quick installation. If you take all the time involved, I'm going to install Raspbian. Hi, that would be you. Am I mute?
Tell them what a Pi-hole is.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But I want you to know this part about it. It's super fast. Again, if you take all the time involved from starting from scratch, I'm going to install Raspbian or Raspberry Pi OS. There goes an hour. Then you got 5 minutes of prep, finding out some information that you're going to need to answer questions down the road. And then the install takes 5 minutes. It works out of the box. We're going to do a lot more stuff with it next week and show you things you can do above and beyond. But we're talking about a 10-minute install after you've got Raspberry Pi OS installed. So
Okay.
Again, it's the big project for today. It's our third project that we're going to get into. And what it is in simplest terms, and they even say this on their website on pi-hole.net, it's an ad blocker, except it does it in an untraditional manner. It takes away the DNS references that come back when you do any kind of DNS call. So if you make a type into a website in your browser by name, www.thisisacoolplace.com, DNS is going to go out and find the IP address for it and send you back that thing. But it's also going to pick up all the IP addresses of all the advertising that happens on that site. And what happens is we're going to filter back that DNS response list through this Pi-hole box, and it's going to filter all that junk out. So it's not going to make it to your browser, and that makes everything load much faster, and you don't get pestered by a lot of different ads. And it's magic. It's simple. It's low power. It's blindingly fast. You'll never even notice that it's there after it's installed. This is a cool toy, and it has almost nothing to do with CompTIA unless you wanted to do some kind of wire capture and go see what was going on port 53.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so that's the day.
That's our third project.
It is our third project. You're
Project one.
implying I should mention the other two, huh? All right,
Yes.
I'll cover that, and then we'll start with questions. So we do this in kind of an order every week. First thing I do, I got ahead of myself, is to talk about what we did last week. So let's finish up or review ourselves. Last week we completed our Media Center series. We integrated a Kodi Media Center with a Plex Media Server. And that integration simply means that I can use Kodi anywhere in the world, at my office, at my home, traveling at the airport, whatever, and it will be able to access my library on my Plex server wherever I have my Plex server, probably at home. So it's just a cool thing. The Plex library was a really cool thing because it does such a great job of curating your saved media, movies, songs, shows, whatever you got there. And now we can take advantage of that well-organized curation. Is that a word? It is now. Using the better media player, which is Kodi. We also did a Wireshark because we do kind of a protocol of the week.
Yep.
We use Wireshark to check out DNS calls, confirm that DNS is a UDP process, not a TCP process, and it uses port 53.
Right.
That's where we've been. where we're going today. In keeping with a protocol of the week, we're going to do a Wireshark thing. And this is actually going to be a two-part thing. I want to show you a VLAN capture. So that means we're going to have to do a bit of a review on VLANs. I've got it's going to be a short review. I'm not going to do a class on VLANs. That's more appropriate for Mike's AMAs, and maybe we can convince him to do that. But I'm going to review a little bit about the difference between an unmanaged port or an unmanaged switch, a managed switch that supports untagged VLANs and tagged VLANs. And then we'll do a capture on that and take a look at what's going on. It's pretty quick. Excuse me, dry throat.
All right, that sounds pretty exciting.
Thank you. Next, we're going to take a very quick tour of basic bash scripting. If you're going to play in the Windows environment, there are some scripting languages that you've got to learn. You got to learn PowerShell, and maybe you're looking at it today saying, I don't need to learn that. I look at that and say, I don't need to learn that. And yet I find it kind of smashing itself into my face regularly. You can do this and you should do this with PowerShell. Okay, so it's time for us all to start getting into that. And if you want to go a little farther back, we've been doing some basic scripting in the Microsoft environment arena forever, in the DOS environment way back when, and then later in the command line environment with batch file programming. We call it programming, it's scripting. And in the Linux environment, bash scripting or other shell scripting is the way to go. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the very simplest techniques there. And I think what you're going to walk away with that's most important is not the language or the syntax. That's so easy. You're not going to learn much from me. What you're going to learn about Linux is programs aren't programs in the way that programs are in Windows. What makes a program operational in Windows is it has executable code in it, and it has an extension, EXE, typically, or in the old days, COM for command, and there's some other ones. Well, you don't have to have any kind of extension in a Linux program to make it executable. You have to put appropriate executable code inside it, and then you apply an attribute to it that says, this is an executable file. So it can have no extension, can have any extension. So we're going to show you how to do all that stuff. It's going to be pretty slick.
All right.
And then we finish up the day with creating this Pi-hole.
Right.
Pi-hole was invented on or for the Raspberry Pi. It has, of course, since been ported to half a dozen other platforms.
Okay.
So if you've got a machine lying around that's just not doing anything, you don't have a Pi yet, hey, you can install a Pi-hole on there. You could even install it on your regular day-to-day computer. But if that computer is down, the other computers won't be able to take advantage of it. And I'll show you what and why and how and for to do that.
All right, so it sounds good. So as far as how this pertains to the CompTIA, IT Fundamentals, A+, Net+, Security+, etc., it does a lot. So learning about Linux commands and command line things and scripting, this is all in there.
Absolutely.
It's on the edges on A+, but it's very much there in Net+, and you need to understand this kind of stuff for Security+. And the scripting things are actually in IT Fundamentals Plus. So,
right. So as a tool, Pi-hole isn't a stunningly necessary thing, but all of the things that go around making and using it, definitely applicable. Very good, Scott. Thanks.
Yep.
I want to do my big news reminder before we do get started for real. The last thing, and that would be this.
Oh, this is the big deal.
Oh yeah.
Not yet.
I can't tell you the level of excitement in-house we have about this thing. We're posting it on our various media sources, and people are getting there. So I want you guys all to be turning up first and have your questions ready to go, because on Friday, September 25th, 2 weeks from today, if I add right, give or take. Yeah, 14 days hence. We have a special guest, Dr. Hey, I have been mispronouncing his name for as long as he's existed. I just assumed it was Eben. And in speaking with him and watching some things that he's done lately, it's Eben. So it's Dr. Eben Upton. And we call him the founder of Raspberry Pi Foundation. So there's certainly truth to that. There's so much more to him. And in fact, the foundation didn't come first. He first created a saleable product under a company called Raspberry Pi Trading. And then when it's making money, then he applies that to Raspberry Pi Foundation. So he's going to talk to us about all kinds of things, take your questions, talk about the things he wants to talk about. I've got some questions for him. If you can't be around and you're going to catch it on the archive later, but you want your question asked, email it or chat it today. We'll copy and paste it and save it and add it to the list.
Sounds great. I'm super excited.
Oh, man.
I think it's going to be very fun. Apparently.
All right, let's go take a look at this. There's a lot of activity already going on. And a pretty good turnout for a Friday. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So Taco makes it in first.
Excellent.
Way to go. I was thinking about checking in about 12 o'clock, saying I'm here just in case. Then I'll get wrapped up and talk to everybody and not get any prep done.
Which is pretty much what I did.
Hello, Simon. Well, that's good. Hello, everybody. Tullowit, you asked a question the other day. I have it in my pile O answers. We'll get to that today. I don't remember what it is, but I know it's a Tullowit one. Also, in my pile O answers, I went down the rabbit hole this week. We were talking about a 9-part trilogy or a 9-part anything. We have that answer. Or those answers.
We have those answers.
Yeah, because there's a Roman root and there's a Greek root and.
Yeah. And there's a difference between a set of 9 and a trilogy of trilogies.
Which I do like. It's good wordsmithing.
Yep. Yeah, we had a lot of fun playing with that all week.
What is your comment here? PF, pi is the best.
Tullowit just misspelled of.
Okay.
His morning slice, pie.
I thought it was going to be like a purposeful typo for PS.
Nope, just having a fun.
All right.
Just being silly.
Hello, Debbie Strauch. Good to see you too. Nice to have you here. We're going to do some fun stuff today. Okay, so it looks like Dave is still in makeup and wardrobe. It's not. I changed my background to blue drapes, and you should have seen it. I'm here in a dark shirt, working all day, and I just look like the Black Shadow, or with this really, really, really hot, white, bright light on the window side of my face.
You look
and
like
I'm going to leave it mode, Scott.
You look like the character from some DC comic where one half was all dark and the other half was like blown out white.
Exactly. Who is that? Two-Face.
Two-Face, yeah. He was definitely not a good look.
Yeah, not toothpaste. So I got a big white reflective card over on this side, and then when I changed into a lighter shirt, no matter how bad you think this looks, it's so much better than it's been all day.
Yeah, and including 5 minutes before we went live. Why rush into these fixes?
Kevin Lopez, I have an answer from your question as well, and you got your 8 gig Pi yesterday. You asked the other day about powering multiple Pis from a single wire.
Yeah, he asked that during Mike's AMA, right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
So I have that answer. We'll talk about that.
Okay, cool.
Dr. Quinn is here. Wonderful. All we need is Alice, and most of the women will be here. There's one with a long one who identified herself as a woman recently. I'll have to come up with her. Dave looks like a country singer today. Very cool. Old guy with the hat. Yeah, it's a new opening that we're experimenting with.
Brendan is here. Good to see you. Jonathan.
There's our Jonathan. That's the first time that I just saw him in the AMA this week for the first time. I was looking away and I heard Mike pronounce a new name. I was like, cool. So welcome, Jonathan. Wherever you're looking. Oh man, if you guys, seriously, we're going to do bits of lyric today.
I told you, that's why I was laughing. I wasn't laughing at your monologue, man. I was laughing at the lyrics on the screen.
Right. The hat is closer to Travis Tritt or maybe Jason Aldean. I'm not a country and Western guy. I don't like either kind, country or Western. Ooh, he went with the Blues Brothers joke.
Oh, man.
Yeah, bring me a higher love. That's behind me. Andre is here. Greetings.
What am I going to do with you?
Thinking about our behind-the-scenes conversation last night regarding Andre. You were on a roll Wednesday, Andre. That's all I'm going to say. You were definitely heading toward the edges. So I needed a new reloading bench. My old one got too small. Okay.
Yeah, but the next comment is even funnier.
I'm getting there. I think those benches shrink over time.
We're at, we are, we will start mentioning the time. Obviously, this is the opening comments. So we're at like 2:05, 2:06. But as we get into various questions, as we go through the live stream, we'll try to remember, better than Mike did on Wednesday, to mention the time stamp. So you can, if you do the little vertical ellipses at the top right of the chat, you can turn on the timestamp. And so when I say, oh, Andre de Gooiert has a hilarious comment about his clothes shrinking at 2:06. So there you go. So there's a lot of chatter. Kay Boateng.
Yeah, that's where I want to go next. Go ahead.
Asking about printers. Lots of people have responded, including with lots of comments and page numbers, and go get Mike's video. This episode specifically, Mike goes through it all in very great detail. Seems to be having some trouble with troubleshooting laser printers.
Right, I'm seeing that. And that's an important one. I don't know to call you Kay or Baotang, but there are a fair number of questions that involve printers on both of the A+ exams. Many of them have nothing to do with printers. They just use printers as a framework to ask another question. But there are also a notable number of specific questions about basic printing. And when it comes to troubleshooting, they love laser printer troubleshooting questions. Questions like your page is coming out all black, or your page is coming out all white. And they're going to give you a list of reasons for the likely cause of those. So if you have a specific question, we can hit that. I'm not in a position on the Friday AMAs to do an A+ presentation on printing and troubleshooting. That's more in line with the Monday, Wednesday thing that Mike does. Yes, Scott.
But you can also, we'll put up our email addresses here, and including, we type Mike's email address as well. So if you come on the Monday or Wednesday AMA and want to give Mike a little heads up and say, please, can you go through printers? Can you do this stuff? That's a good thing to do. Mike's email is michaelm@totalsim.com. And he will be on Monday and be very happy to address, I think, your specific questions. But if it's easier if you email, because then he can have slides ready, some show and tell. Because it's one thing to go, well, first you have this thing, and then you have this thing, and then you have this thing, and you're doing it all with hand puppets. That's not as conducive to memorization or to learning as giving us a chance to go, okay, this is a complicated process. Let's go through this part by part by part, and how that manifests the various errors that you can get with laser printers. So more than happy to do that either next Friday. Well, Mike will be more than happy to do it Monday or Wednesday, given a little bit of heads up and some specific questions. So, or you can.
I've got a note to present that to Mike over the weekend so he can prep for it if he does. And also, Kay, if you send any of us an email, let us know if you're in any of the Udemy courses or have any of our video presentations. There is a specific dedicated presentation that Mike does on laser printer troubleshooting, and we can point you to that one, and that will probably help a lot, at least for background if you're still a little confused, and we can clear up anything, but there's a good presentation there.
Right.
Web Dev Bootcamp. That's Deepak, right? No, that's the wrong name. No, it's not.
No, that's the right name. It's Deepak.
Yeah. Greetings. Troubleshooting lasers, especially going past 208. Andre's talking. So I tend to do this, and because we get a lot more questions these days, and especially today because I got a lot of presentation material. If I see that you have sent an app to somebody else, I'm presuming that you're talking to them, and I'm going to slide by it unless Scott looks at one and says that's important for us to talk about.
Right. So just so you know the kind of the flow of things, and I'm looking at the kind of the slowed down chat on a monitor just above my screen. So if I look up here, then I'm kind of looking at what question we're going to answer next. But I'm also looking over to the right where I'm catching all your silly jokes. And I'm not laughing. When Dave is saying something very serious and I start laughing because I'm catching your one-liners on my other screen. So no disrespect, Dave. You know that.
No, I absolutely not. Andre de Goyer tells you that his book arrived today.
It's great, except he wasn't home.
Yeah, so he gets to pick it up tomorrow at the post.
Yep. And then he's gonna, and I love the way Europeans can say, oh, and then I'm gonna go to Germany tomorrow.
Right. To get cheaper gas.
For gas. I'm like, oh, of course, they're right next to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, nice. I'm gonna go to Louisiana because it's still 3 hours away.
But yeah, this is Texas. Nothing is close unless you're sitting on the border.
Yeah, so I'm flying to El Paso or going to El Paso in a week, which, just to give you an idea, Houston to El Paso is over 800 miles. I can put it in kilometers if you give me a minute. But the key thing to remember is Houston to El Paso is the same distance, that's from one Texas city to another, as from El Paso all the way to Los Angeles. The same distance. So Texas is just crazy big. So yeah, there's no just dropping by the neighbors. All right, Patricia Grace is here.
I'm reading past 213. It's a lot of intercommunication. Patricia Grace. Oh, there she is. I wasn't looking at names. I was just looking at the ats. So welcome. Good to see you back.
A lot of people are adding me, so I'm seeing a lot of stuff.
Of course. And if there's something that's targeted to you that you want to hit, knock right in. Eben means stone in Hebrew.
Fellow, it's like knowledge of trivia is impressive. It is
just trivial. The speculation around here, and I've never bothered to look it up, is that in this instance, it has nothing to do with Yiddish or Hebraic origins, but is short for Ebenezer. But we don't know that for a fact. So I now see 47 people opening up a new tab, researching the bio on Eben Upton, and that's fine.
And you will be shocked when you get the bio. How many doctorates does he have, Dave?
Say again?
How many doctorates does he have?
I know that he has degrees in 5 different fields. I don't know that they're all PhDs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's a knockout. And he's got like 4 high-tech degrees, electronics and physics and comp sci. And then he's also got a degree in business, which seems so appropriate for what he does. You can't just learn this stuff on the street and run a multi-million-dollar charitable foundation.
Right. So at 218, Andre asked a serious question.
I could use
Can you
it.
power a Pi using a power supply unit out of a PC, which is not as odd of a question as it might seem on the
I
surface.
think it's a perfect question.
How do you power a Pi?
It's a piece of pie, you'll pardon the pun. So yes, you certainly can. Remember, you've got a whole bunch of rails, different voltage feeders coming out of a computer power supply. There's multiple 12-volt rails. There's multiple 5-volt rails. There's at least one 3.3-volt rail. Katie sighting. Waving to Katie.
Oh, being my spouse.
I mean, the missus, sorry. Hey, can we edit this when we're done and take names out? Anyway, so most of the 5-volt rails on a standard computer power supply unit support more than 3 amps, but that's what you got to confirm. The Raspberry Pi 4 fully loaded takes about 3 amps. The Raspberry Pi 3 fully loaded takes 2.5 amps, 2.5. So you want to make sure it supplies every bit of that. And then, of course, what you're going to have to do, the tricky part, is clip off the big P1 connector, the 24-pin connector, and close up all the connectors that you don't need, or clip them off so that they don't short out. And then the fun part, you're going to have to come up with a micro C in the case, a C connector, USB-C connector in the case of a RAS4, or a USB micro connector on a RAS3 that's got pigtail wires hanging out of it, so you can splice the +5 to the red wire and the ground to the black wire. So yeah, it's doable. It's not something that I could get on here today and demonstrate, but absolutely it's doable. And that leads into Kevin's question from the Wednesday AMA: how do I power multiple Pis from one wire? And there are effectively 2 ways to do it. The one that we just described, And then there is a similar method to one that we just described. If you go on to, I don't know, any of the usual sites like eBay or surplus electronic sites or regular electronic sites, and you look for a power supply with 5 volts and X amount of amps, you'll see pictures of an aluminum box that's probably about yay big by yay big, and there will be terminals on one side of it. And you're going to plug in your AC terminals, your 120 or your 240 if you're outside of 120 land. And then there'll be a +5 terminal and a ground terminal. And again, you can just hook a pair of wires to that. And if you're going to do multiple pies, you're going to have to tap those wires with a C connector and then a C connector and a C connector, or a micro connector and a micro connector. And it all comes off one feed. So it's effectively the same thing as using a computer power supply. It's just dedicated. It only has 1 voltage output. It's 5 volts. Or you can do what I do. I can do all those things, but what a royal pain. Let's see how much damage I can do as I drop this stuff down.
So
Everybody's seen this before, but there's some new faces, so not everybody. Here's a stack of Pi 3Bs, and they each have a USB power provider plugged into their USB micro connector. And on the other end of that is a bank connector. I can't get it much higher without doing that, but
okay.
let's do this. There we go. That's kind of a good angle on that.
Yeah,
So this is an 84-watt power supply designed for plugging in and charging all your phones and your tablets and your iPhone and whatever. They have standard USB-A connectors on them. So we plug that guy in, plug him into a Pi, and off you go. There's a master on-off switch somewhere on here. I'm using a different one right now upstairs, obviously, but so I think that's a really great way to do it. It's very modular. I can do what I need when I need, and I don't have to solder and go order USB connectors and all that good stuff.
Sounds good. Because when you started talking about all the Pi splicing,
Yeah.
I was getting, aside from the puns that kept running through my head poorly, yeah, that sounded pretty
Yeah, that gets into weeds, and it doesn't call for special skills, but it does take a handful of the right tools, and you're going to have to do some serious shopping. Good question, Andre.
Absolutely.
And, oops, thank you. Guess what it just did?
Oh,
It shot off like crazy.
yep. So 219, thank you, Tellowit. The white and black face halves were
There we
Star
go.
Trek.
Yeah, that was the other guy, the Star Trek reference.
Yep. That's definitely what he looked like.
That's right. Two-Face wasn't black and white. He was okay face and badly scarred one.
Right.
Batman. Okay.
Right. Printers as a service. Oh my gosh. Something as a service.
Look, and let's get all the puns out of the way. Power supply as a service, hat as a service, and sock puppets as a service, says Scott.
Like it.
Rolling past 224. Alice wants to know if you're jealous. So yeah, Choco Taco depends on the kind of power supply you have, but if it'll put out 5 volts and preferably 5.25, that's the real trick on the new Pi. They want that just to deal with current sags. But yeah, you can make it out of anything that'll pump out 5 volts and 3 amps. 228, Ebenezer means stone of help. My BA is in biblical studies. Man.
I know, right? So Alice Potsy popped in at 226. Hi, Alice. How are you?
There it is. That's everybody. And all the ladies are here. Nice to see you, Alice. Ciao.
Like that taha. Hello. A new name for me.
I glanced past that when my thing went blast mode on me, so
Gotcha.
wait to get back to that.
And for those of you who are new, the chat feed, when we try and like save it, sometimes we'll just do one little tiny scroll on our mouse wheel and it'll go from 20 minutes ago to all the way to the end. So it's like, okay, where was I? Thus the timestamps. So BA in biblical studies, huh?
Yeah.
So mine is in political science.
And
Far more useful.
security background in the Army and
Right? And a chef. So there you go.
Chef, he
You know
picked
all these things
coconuts
about-
on the island for tourists.
Yeah, we know all these
Does
things.
that machete job on them and slams a straw in it.
I like it. And yes, Hawaii is a long ways away from any other land. Yeah. Yeah.
Taco Taco, that was not a MacGyver thing. That was just so obvious when I saw it. I was like, yeah, okay, plug it in. It works. 233, Kevin Lopez. Is there a better OS than the Raspberry Pi OS for Windows users to learn Pi and Linux? I was thinking of learning how to do a multi-boot system from SSD for Ubuntu and Kali so I can learn cybersecurity. All right, you got two topics going here. Scott's got some thoughts on a better OS, so I'm gonna let him start that.
Okay, so the standard way we jump into Linux, I mean, for anybody really, is in a virtual machine with Ubuntu. I mean, that's like the easiest way to learn it. Or even better, if you have an old computer just kind of laying around, or parts that you can put together, putting Ubuntu on straight onto the computer, and you have a dedicated Ubuntu box that you can play with, you can break, whatever. That's the easiest way I know to get into Linux, at least to start. Because you're talking about wanting to go into cybersecurity, then Kali is definitely, that's your answer right there. It's dedicated specifically to all of the security issues and pen testing, and comes with incredible tools built in, and they're right there you can right click on the desktop, like, oh, that's my toolbox for doing penetration testing, for doing cybersecurity stuff. That it's all there, and very much good. Now I'm going to toss it over to the Pi side, because there are multiple versions of Linux that we can run on a Pi also.
And I'm going to dance a little bit in your arena too,
okay,
about one of the things that he said here. First of all, is there a better OS than Raspberry for learning Linux? So you said Pi/Linux. So I'm going to say learning Pi, that's one thing. Learning Linux is another. And if you want one that's geared toward a Windows user who has no exposure or experience to Linux and wants to begin to dabble in it, in general, the OS of choice is called Mint. It's a Mint Linux. It looks and acts a lot like Windows, so it's easy to transition to, and then you can start playing around with its command line and start learning Linux from there. And then once you start to get a handle on it, it'll feel simplistic, and it'll be time to abandon that and switch to Raspberry Pi OS if you're talking about Raspberry Pi, or doing what Scott says, and that's getting Ubuntu or Pop OS. I don't know, how does that fit, Pop OS? Is that a good learning Linux, or is that just?
So I'm a gamer. That's basically, that's the real reason that I do computers. Yeah, I write books, I do teaching, I do all that stuff, but gaming is why I do computing, and that and art, but gaming. So I went around looking for, I just upgraded my son's gaming machine, his college machine, right? But so he was throwing out old parts, like a NVIDIA 1060 video card. I know, right? And so I'm like, maybe it's time to finally build my Linux gaming machine. And so I went looking for what's the best distribution for Linux and gaming. And one of the ones that was not Steam OS is called Pop OS. So that's the one I installed. It's still not great for most games, because Linux is there's just not that many great games out there for Linux yet. But it's a stripped down, very cool looking OS, incredibly clean interface. So I'm liking it so far.
Good. All right, so he asked another question. He's got a follow-up with this one. He didn't ask this as a question. He just read the sentence here. I was thinking of learning how to do multi-boot from SSD for Ubuntu and Kali.
Okay.
And then in a couple of paragraphs down, he mentioned Berry Boot being popular, Berry Boot. Berry Boot was very popular when it came out, but I gotta say, in general, multi-boot is dead. This is, you can do it. And I don't know if Berry Boot is supported or being added to anymore since probably the last 2 years. It's possible, but I haven't seen much discussion on it in several years. This is 2020, and we have all achieved the ability to run a virtual machine or two or more. The problem with multi-booting, among other things, is you get to boot an operating system. And that's what you live with until you're ready to play in the other operating system. And then you've got to shut it down and boot the other operating system. With virtual machines, you can run multiple operating systems simultaneously. I'll go over to this window and play in Ubuntu, and I'll go in the host and play Windows, and I'll go in this window and play fill in the blank. So there are plenty more. So it's not a great solution. And again, I can't speak with certainty, but I'm pretty sure Berry Boot might still be around in its old member, but I doubt it. And if it is still around, I would also have doubts that it'll run on the current Raspberry Pi OS, because again, it's been so long since I've seen it update or any reference to it. They've gone through at least 2 generations of Raspbian and Raspberry Pi OS. So it's not a skill that you want to put on your res when you're heading for a job saying, look, I can do multi-booting. Why?
Yeah.
That's like saying I can drive a carriage with a buggy and a whip.
You can too?
Yeah, you'll find the niche market.
We still have horse-drawn carriages in Houston.
I hate to off track, but that just triggers my favorite story. When I first moved to Houston 28 years ago, I came here first for a couple of months before the missus came. And we have a rodeo here in town every year. And there's a drive where people come in wagon trains and all of their horses from all over Texas. They ride for a week or 2 or less, and they stop and they camp in places. And I just happened to be driving into town the week that was happening. And I called home. This is the days before cell phones, and said, you are not going to believe this, but they still ride horses around here and use covered wagons. And that didn't shock any of my people, because I'm from Ohio and Pennsylvania, where we still have plenty of the Amish doing the same thing, but I couldn't have been more wrong.
Yep.
Ian Camacho's here, our compatriot in the office. Well, in another part of the world. We need a Total Seminars West, maybe we should start calling that.
Way west.
Hey, Dave, question. Why do you think that Pi is not anywhere as popular or known as it should be, given the super low price? I think, considering the millions that are sold every year, that in fact it is. It's not a PC, it's not an Apple, but that's not its market. This is not, at least yet, designed to be a day-to-day computer for everybody. So I don't think it's the everyman's computer, doesn't get marketed that way. And most people don't want to know that. Even though there are millions of us, we are a relative niche compared to computer users. This is a hobbyist computer, and to a smaller degree, an industrial computer. So I just don't think it plays in that arena. I'm going to save that question and present that to the good doctor.
Sounds good.
His take on it. While Scott looks at something else and I do copy and pasting.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Or answers more of that. All right, that's done.
Okay.
We were close to the end here, and I want to start getting on some other stuff, but let's see what we can finish out the pile here.
Sure.
So we're 2:37. I'm only 6 minutes behind on questions.
Okay. You're at where? 236?
I'm sorry, you're talking to me or someone else?
You.
I'm not hearing it. Say again.
You're at 237, is that what you said?
Yes. Patricia Grace, totally good plan. Did I miss anything up there earlier?
Yeah. So Telo was just saying I had a hard time deciding what I was going to be when I grew up, and I finally just decided not to grow up.
There you go.
And we're like, oh, good plan.
As far as I'm concerned, cowboy is still a valid career choice.
Yep.
And fireman.
That's right. And now they're talking about, yeah, I wouldn't squelch you for this is a 239. Telo skirting we only have 2 rules really, basically, on the AMA: no politics or religion. So yeah, that's what he's referring to. It's like, I don't want to be squelched, but yeah.
I don't want to grow up.
I think we're all struggling a little bit.
Well, Tolowit is now in my basket for his response to you, because I'm going to sing the Toys R Us song for the rest of the weekend. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The Great Geek Cup. Coup. The Great Geek Coup. Okay.
Okay, so Kevin has a follow-up question.
Time mark.
Are you there?
Yeah, time mark.
242.
Okay.
So I think I'll just do separate SSD drives, one with Kali and one with Mint to dabble on my Pi. I have the new Retro Flag case that has a cool SSD compartment. It looks like a game cartridge. So
That's not a bad approach. Again, I still have a minor problem with it in that it's, boot this or boot that, but, and you don't get to play with both at the same time, but nothing wrong with it. In fact, I'm going to do exactly that same thing today. I've got a Pi that I'm going to do 2 of my presentations on today with 1 micro SSD. I wonder if I can, yeah, there's kind of visible.
That's it, so tiny.
Yeah. And then when we're done with those, Scott's going to take over while I go do a little dismantling and get this one installed. So, and there was a reason that I didn't want to run that one on an already loaded operating system that's got a bunch of other goodies. I wanted it to be dedicated.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Nintendo nostalgia. Hey, we're about the end here. Tolowood, Cowboys. Ian, I used to go by Big Pun, but that's been taken. I'm going to need more background on that, Ian.
I don't want to pick that up in a live chat, man.
Yeah, I feel that coming up in the Monday morning check-in meeting. Yeah, Kevin, I'm with you on that. 1 Pi per thing, and so you can always run simultaneously.
Yep.
Does Pi have any competitors? There are. I did a video, I don't know, a year and a half ago now, about it was kind of like the precursor to this series. I was setting up a Udemy course, and the second episode was here's all the competitors at the time to Raspberry Pi, and there were over 60 of them. And I just saw a new one out today that's getting press, Rock Pi, but there's Banana Pi, there's Orange Pi. I have a couple of Orange Pis myself. Oh man, none of the names are coming to me. BeagleBone, zillions. That's a real simple Google search, competitors or alternatives. I think I would use in my search, alternatives to Raspberry Pi, and you will find up with Junction. Oh, DMC. Okay. Pun DMC. You are now ejected from the forum, Ian. All right. I'm going to do some work. Let's do something fun.
All right. Sounds good.
Let me head over to Uncle Notes.
Educate us, Dave.
Well, I'll try. You're a pretty smart group. So I want to talk briefly about VLANs, just enough to lay some groundwork so that we can do a Wireshark capture on one. So I don't need a slide for this.
Okay.
I want to talk about what a VLAN is. My world vanished. Hang on a second. Okay, I'm back. So take your basic desktop switch. This is an unmanaged switch. No matter what I plug into here, whatever kind of host I can plug into here, it's able to talk to any and every other host that's on here. It could talk to a link that's going out to a router and talk to the world. It could go to a link that's talking to another switch and therefore be able to talk to all of the hosts on that switch. This thing is a connectivity device. If you want to think of this thing as kind of like a hand, and here's all the connections, everybody can talk to the hand and in and out the hand, and cool. It's a great connectivity device. But in larger environments than the ones that most of us deal with on a day-to-day basis, I don't know whether they're small offices at work, if you don't work at a mega corp, or certainly at your home, this is acceptable. But there are those organizations that say this is not. There are times, there are groups that we want to be able to communicate with one another, and they should not be able to communicate electronically with members of other groups.
Okay.
And for that, we have a VLAN, a virtual LAN. Now, why is it a VLAN? Because smarter than a switch, which lives at what layer? I know you're all typing in layer something. The next layer up is a box called a router. A router has wires coming out of it, kind of looks like a switch, except what goes out each wire is a cable with a network address. And it's the job of the router to pass data. I see you grinning. I hope there's something funny out there. I don't think I'm being that funny. So the job of a router is to pass data off of one network address and out another when it's appropriate, when it's designed to go out perhaps to the internet or something like that, and or to block or filter those kinds of things. Well, let's make it happen quicker, smarter, and faster with a switch. The router does that at layer 3 based on network addresses. The switch does it at layer 2 based on MAC addresses, the addresses that are burned into our network interface cards. So here is, let me see if I get it upside down. Yeah. Here's a 48 port managed switch. I pulled this out of my home network this morning. So right now the house is down. I got to get done with this presentation real quick and get this back in the rack. Okay, that's not quite true. This is one of the spares for the ones in the rack. I have about 20 in the rack at the house here. And
He's not joking. Just saying.
Mike has a rack. I do not have a rack. Though I certainly should in the Pi Lab. I'm trying to get a good view of this thing. All right, so this is a managed switch.
Wait,
they're not
switch as a service? What was that?
switching as a service. That's legit. I need switch balancing as a service. So a managed switch can do a lot of cool things, and one of them is to institute VLANs, virtual LANs, and virtual LANs allow us to create these little isolated pockets of users. Now let me bring up.
So the concept, the term for this making VLANs and doing all of these different little networks that connect to the same switch that don't necessarily or cannot connect to each other, right, is called network segmentation.
Thank you.
So,
You sound like you're writing a Security Plus book right now.
You think?
All right, VLANs come in two flavors, tagged and untagged. Let me do a little sharing here.
Okay.
Click and click and click. So what we're looking at here is a graphic of an untagged VLAN. An untagged VLAN says we go into the switch management. I'm afraid to do that, Scott. I'll do it, but here's what's going to happen, something bad, because I was just doing an experiment on it. But okay. So here's an untagged VLAN, and what we do is we identify any port to be a member of a particular VLAN. VLANs get an ID like VLAN 0 or VLAN 1 or VLAN 1000, whatever. And so if I make, as I did in this instance, I took 4 ports on a simple switch and I assigned each of them to VLAN 0. And I took another 4 ports on that same switch and I assigned them to VLAN 1. Anybody who connects to these first 4 ports can communicate with anybody else in those with that same VLAN number, so with those same other 3 ports. They cannot communicate with anybody in any other VLAN. You can do that later with heavy magic, but that's beyond what I want to do here. Same thing then, anybody who's plugged into one of the ports that's designated as a VLAN 01 port can only talk to anybody else who's on VLAN 1, would have to be plugged into these ports. So over here, I'm looking at the table that exists inside the switch. Here's a list of all the ports. Here's a list of all the hosts that are attached to those ports by MAC address. And that has no pertinence to VLANs at this time. That's just trying to get things identified from and to whom they're going. And then we've identified that port 1 is in VLAN 00, and so is port 2, and so is port 3 and 4 and so forth. 5, 6, 7, and 8 are all in VLAN 01. So since the station with address, MAC address BCE is in VLAN 01, the system will not allow him to communicate with anybody who's connected to a port as VLAN 00. Now, why do we call that an untagged VLAN? Because built into the frame of Ethernet, there is room for a tag. And we can put in that tag a VLAN ID. And what's going to happen there is he says, I won't be dependent on the switch parameters. I'm going to use a little different technology. So let's see if we can get away with this. Yeah, when I did that expand and contract earlier, I ran into the same problem. I
Sorry, Dave.
couldn't advance. So I'm going to have to break out of it for a second.
All right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No. I wanted it. I know, I understand the problem, but that's life. Okay,
All right.
sharing.
We've got our basic VLAN set up. Switch split into two VLANs. They can communicate within the VLAN, but not between the VLANs.
That is correct.
All right.
All right, so this is going to be a little small, but we're just going to use my words here. Oh, heck, I can just stop and restart it again. What the heck? So let's blow this guy up. So this is a tagged VLAN switch. And in this one, what we do is we go into the switch and we assign MAC addresses to a particular VLAN. So it doesn't matter what port they plug into. Whenever the switch says, oh, I see a network interface card, a host connected here with address ABC, I'll go look in the tag table. ABC is in VLAN 1. So if ABC ever wants, and I've got to do this for every MAC address, then I'm going to hook into the switches. That's the pain of tagged VLANs. Some administrator has to deal with every new NIC, identify who it's going to be, not who it's associated with, but what VLAN it should be associated with, and then go into the switch and program that. The value of it is later, if the person who's at ABC, let's say that's Fred, changes offices. So we move his computer out of this office and we move it into that office. When we plug him in, he'll be plugged into a totally different port, but it's okay. The switch says it's still ABC. That person, that computer is still on VLAN 0. Does that make sense? Because that's what it is. You know, after you zoom it, there has to be a way to advance in this stupid Microsoft photo viewer. There it is. It wouldn't highlight last time. So last thing to look about that then is, let's take a look at the frame construction. Your standard non-VLAN Ethernet frame starts with the destination MAC address of some station, 6 bytes, followed by the source address. We put receiver and sender because I use this for a different class that's a little more simplistic. And then it's got a type field in there. That's an IP packet, it's an ICMP packet, it's something like that. And then the rest of the frame has the data from the upper layers, whatever we're doing, optional padding, and then a frame gets finished off with a frame check sequence. The frame tag, the VLAN tag, happens inside the switch. Once a frame goes into a switch that uses tagged VLANs, it says, oh, okay, I see your MAC address is ABC, and so I'm going to put an identifier in here while we're living around in switch land, and even when you exit the last switch, but that's how it gets used to get routed around through the internal guts. And then we still have the type field. So you can see an Ethernet 2 frame has an additional 4 bytes when we're playing VLANs. And again, it'll have those same 4 bytes left on them when they leave the switch, but they don't have them on in advance when you send your message into the switch, because you don't have to know what VLAN you're on. Funky, huh?
Very. Okay.
That being the case,
All right.
let's take a look at a capture with a VLAN tag.
And for that capture, we're going to use
Say it ain't so.
Wireshark.
My VNC. I shut it off, huh? Okay, I can get it back.
All right.
We'll get it back. We'll get it back. What the heck movie was that from?
I don't know.
It's a good one, whatever it is.
And so memorable too.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an Indy Jones, but I don't think that's right. All right, I'm logging into a remote session with a Pi.
Okay.
Now I'm going to share because I'm a nice guy and sharing is caring. All right, you're here with me. So we'll fire up Wireshark. Now I don't have a managed switch operational here, and if I did, I'd have to get it all configured so that we could capture all the internal traffic. So I'm using, my friend, one of the captures that's available over at wiki.wireshark.org. And you can see I've had it open so I could experiment with it. So I'm not going to have to go file, open, and search for it. I'm just going to say, open this VLAN, came out of an HP switch. And here's a capture. Now what we've got here is a bunch of captured packets. And I'm just going to look at the first 4 ever so briefly. If I click on the first one, here's the 4 chunks of data that are in it. There's a basic frame. If I highlight that, it shows me the whole data. And then we can see the Ethernet 2 framing. And if I want to break that up a little bit, there's the destination MAC address. There's the source MAC address. You can see they both came from a VMware OUI, another class. And that tells us that this is done in a virtual machine. And the only other field in that frame is a type field. It's an IP packet. So he sent out an echo, a ping request. And there came a reply with the same destination address, back to the sender, a source address, and a type packet. A couple other packets got picked up here, some UDP packets. Their Ethernet frames are exactly the same. It's got a source, a destination, and a type. So these may be in a virtual machine. I don't know. But if they are, it's an untagged virtual machine because there's no tag information on here. There's no VLAN ID. But we get down to this 5th frame that they captured and look at the difference in this Ethernet 2. Let me shrink that for a second. So there's still an Ethernet 2 frame, but you can see there's an additional piece that they've added here, and they didn't make it internal to the Ethernet frame. So let's look at it that way then. There's a destination, there's a source, but the type is not an IP packet, it's a VLAN packet. So it has to go to the VLAN handlers in the switch. 802.1q is VLANing. And here's the information that we would find within that tag, that VLAN tag area. And I'm not going to do a class on what all this junk means, but I will do one thing here. The ID in here is 2011. That tells us that he's on VLAN 2011 as a tagged frame. So this can only be delivered to another station that's on VLAN 2011. So they pinged that to a valid person, got the response from that same valid person. And again, when we head down out here now, these are not tagged frames. We don't see that 802.1q field. So it's just something I want you to see. And if you're capturing data and playing around with Wireshark and you run across this unusual field, that's why. So just this little simple exposure and a little simple review on what VLANs are and do for us.
Very cool.
We're on the hour. We're in good shape. The bash stuff is only going to take about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
And as I said, the install of Pi-hole takes only about 5 minutes, but obviously I'm going to talk about it for a little bit more. Break connection with this. Now keep that running. Let me come back and see where you are and see what. Oh, got to do this, right? All right. Any good questions popped up whilst we were doing that? Or
a couple of questions have popped up.
right.
Let me get to them because we were making hand puppet jokes. And then of course the village people came in, and it's a crowd. It's fun. And people.
Oh, yeah, I got a good question at 2:51. You probably have something earlier, but this is one I wanted to hit.
That's the first one.
Okay, good. So Narduli, please give me a phonetic pronunciation if I have that wrong, and I apologize if I do. Is a general way to allow VLANs to communicate between them. So under normal circumstances, the whole point of a VLAN is to create these isolated segments. What was the correct technical term, Scott?
Network segmentation.
Network segmentation. But there is, of course, times when you do need some cross communication between that. So within the switch, there is a protocol that you invoke, and it's not a menu item that's got on it. It's just, I'm going to enable this VLAN to talk to this VLAN, and it happens. the technical term for that concept is inter-VLAN routing.
Right.
So it works like a router. It's a virtual router that lives between virtual networks, just like a real router would work between real networks. So yes, you can invoke inter-VLAN routing. Now, if you're going to do that, having VLAN, unless you're just going to keep one particular VLAN isolated from everybody else, having VLANs is probably not a solution that you're looking for unless you're doing this on a temporary basis or something like that. So it's there, it exists for those that have a need, but there's not that much of a need relative to standard isolated segmentation.
Okay.
And Andre has a managed switch at home. This doesn't surprise me, with 8 ports.
Excellent.
I have a 16, I have a pile of 16s that I use at the office and that I take on the road when I do network classes. But if I hook it up on my desk and it doesn't conform to the way Michael Smyer has things set up, my phone starts ringing fast. So I use unmanaged switches at my desk. All right, TK, off to continue study. We'll see you. Thank you for stopping in if you're still here. Yeah, there's a lot of jokes, Tulowit, that a bunch of pies would become Skynet, and perhaps they are.
That's right.
Don't confuse getting a pie from Cisco with a pie from Cisco. Wrong, you blew the joke, Ian. It's I used Crisco to make the crust for my pie, not Cisco. Echo, echo, echo. I heard that echo. It wasn't for me because I didn't make any changes, so I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I heard that too. That was
Okay. But I put it behind me.
Maybe it was the singularity. I mean, it really could have been.
Obviously.
I hope they've mentioned us.
Buying pies. Yeah, right. Okay, so somebody else made the Skynet joke. Thank you, Chaco. Chaco. I like that. I'm going to not answer for
So Debbie was, I of course made jokes about it, but she was remembering struggling through VLANs initially in her CCNA studies, but yeah.
Yeah, I see that first post at 2:54.
Yeah.
How to take over humanity. That's the other thing she learned in CCNA too, is becoming self-aware and taking over mankind. Using VLAN, okay, Debbie, 256, using VLAN in packet tracer assignments in my CCNA 2 class. Cool. Kevin, quick question for later. Why does my Ethernet connection and Wi-Fi connection have 2 separate IP addresses and MAC addresses associated with my Pi? I see this on my link router. You want that one, Scott? Well, I don't need to make notes on it for answer later. We can answer this.
Why does my Ethernet connection and Wi-Fi connection have 2 separate IP addresses and MAC addresses associated with my Pi? Okay, so the key is that every network connection in existence is going to have a unique MAC address. So this is kind of the basic fundamentals of how modern networks work. So I have a device that has a wired Ethernet gigabit connection, and I have a wireless AC connection. That's 2 different connections. Therefore, they're going to, by definition, have 2 separate MAC addresses.
Right. If we call them network interface cards instead of connections, now they're physical devices, and it makes sense.
Right. Right. So yeah, back in the days when we all had standalone NICs that we plugged into our computers, then it was easy to see the difference. But because it's all just part of the same unit now, it's conceptually a little harder to pull it apart. But they're unique connections and therefore have unique MAC addresses. The same thing is true when you are getting on you are connecting to an IP network, to a TCP/IP network. Each network connection is going to get its own unique IP address. You can't share IP addresses on a network, and so therefore your wired connection is going to get an IP address that differs from your wireless connection.
There you go. So it's completely normal. It's exactly operating as it should be. And then one of the fun things that we can add to that is every computer can do this now. Every modern operating system can do this. You can have 2 or more network interface devices. Could be multiple hardwires, can be multiple wireless, can be combinations of them. And each different operating system takes a different approach to how to operate them if they are both functional one will get priority over the other. And so that's the standard with Windows. If you've got a dual connection in a Windows machine, it'll use the wired connection as long as it's available. And then if you were to disconnect it, then he drops back and uses the wireless. And then this one gets really fun. You can force a connection on one and a different connection on the other. I want to go to this website over my wired connection. I want to go to this website over my wireless, and they can have different network addresses. It'll operate kind of like a bridge or a router in between them. That gets to be really magical. Fun. Okay. Ian's looking at my background on the Pi. It's kind of foggy and misty, and saying it looks like the background in San Francisco and LA right now with all their fires. Disco Inferno. So with that, the winds are blowing the wrong way. You won't get his smoke. We'll get it. Good. Glad you like that, Brendan. I had fun making that up. Debbie's in CCNN 3 now. I believe you can download Packet Tracer and create a network via simulation. Absolutely.
And that was she was actually answering Terrence Tech's earlier question at 2:59. Can you use Packet Tracer to practice creating and using VLANs?
Yep. Remember, by the way, if you want to talk to somebody else and get their attention on the YouTube chat, start with the @ sign and then start typing in their name on here, and it'll highlight when they see the message.
Right.
You won't see it. Kevin Lopez at 304, unrelated side question. Is it simple to format and partition an SSD for an OS using the Raspberry Pi OS? Every tutorial I see is for how to prep the SSD on a PC or Mac, but not directly on a Pi. Yes, it is simple. The simplest way is to do an installation on it with either Raspberry Pi OS, or you have to hook it up to your PC or Mac or other Linux device. And it's an SSD, so it's going to be big. You're going to do a regular partition and format on there using FAT64. And then you copy the installation files over there. And then when you boot it up, the boot up process will reconfigure everything the way it needs to be. So is that simple? Yeah, it's simple once you've done it a couple of times. The first couple of times, I suppose, a little challenging if you're not familiar with it. Could we do that in here? It would be pretty tough because you can't see anything. I just wind up pointing a camera at a screen. You know how bad that looks.
Yeah, or hand puppets.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go. Next question. Would it be best to use a PC to make an OS SSD? Yes. Very welcome, Narduli. Thanks, Debbie. Cisco's a food company, just in case anybody didn't know. I don't know about the rest of the world, but biggest food distribution company in the US. Can you fake your IP in Mac? Well, fake an IP, what does that mean? You can set a static IP address to whatever you want. It will only work if it conforms to the IP network or subnet that you're on. But you know, as long as you don't make something that conflicts with something your network administrator has set up, or the IP address of some other device on your network, knock yourself out, make any IP address. Yes, you can spoof a Mac. I've got a lesson for that next time Scott and I co-host the regular AMA. I've had this one kind of sitting ready to go. I think you can spoof a Mac and Pi. I've never looked at it or considered doing it. Oh, McDonald's. All right.
Sorry, I'm just
Kind of a cart before the horse thing. Let's get it booted up into an operating system and learn some networking, and then we'll start figuring out how and why we might want to spoof. All right, I'm scrolling down my notes here, getting ready for the next section.
Right.
You do your thing there.
all right. So yeah, I mean, we used to do like in the early days of what was the high-speed connection before we actually got good DSL. my first DSL connection. I had to, the way the companies were set up, they were dedicated to a specific MAC address. So you would connect your DSL router to your DSL modem, to your computer directly, which, if you know anything about networking, this is before Windows Firewall, this is a very bad idea, right? Because you're totally wide open on the internet. So of course we wanted to put some kind of firewall box in between we wanted to put a router to be able to, or a switch or whatever, to be able to enable multiple connections to connect to that single internet connection. And so by putting a separate machine in between the network card that was dedicated to the DSL company's connection, we would have to spoof the MAC address of that NIC using our network interface box. So yeah, that was very much a thing. It still is easy to do. There are lots of attacks you can do that are IP spoofing and MAC spoofing. So yeah, lots of good stuff.
All right, I am changing the SD card in my Pi.
Okay.
It's done and powering it up now. Stand by. I'm going to push bash scripting to the end, or maybe even till next week. I'm looking at our time. We got 45 minutes, and I want to get through Pi-hole since that's the big promise of the day.
Oh, so there was a question.
Good.
Chaco Taco was, I missed this. He just said FAT32. Apparently you said FAT64 when you were talking about the initial.
I did.
So let's talk about that briefly.
Okay. Sorry, just reading something here. Okay, I've done that. I've done that. That's booting up. Give me just one more memento here to see if everything happens. Yes, it's happening. Okay.
All right. So what I think this goes down to when you're initially setting up Raspberry Pi OS, right?
Let me catch up with you here. I'm
okay.
Got some buried pages I want to come to. All right, give me a time mark on that real quick so I can.
Hey, sorry. 3:15 is the follow-up question that actually makes sense. And then of course the joke from Tullowit is at 3:17. Yeah. So there you go.
Okay, FAT32. Okay. So Microsoft and other companies have been using a pile of different disk formats and disk systems for a long time. There's FAT16 a million years ago, and FAT32 and FAT64. And all that means is there's a file index. FAT is a file allocation table. FAT16 had 16 bits of information that we could use to identify a storage place on the disk, called in Microsoft terms a cluster. So 2 to the 16th would give me however many 2 to the 16th would give me that many clusters.
65,536.
65,000 clusters. Well, that wasn't enough. That was great for a 32 megabyte disk, the way they clusterize the sizes of their clusters. And so they came up with a bigger, better one, FAT32. Now we got 32 bits, 2 to the 32nd, 4 million. Am I right on that? Or is that 1 million? Whatever it is. It's a whole heck of a lot more clusters. And so we could support larger disks. But once you get to that capacity, cannot for the life of me remember what it was. 2 gigs?
2 gigs, yeah.
I think it was 2 gigs. So once you got into something that was larger than 2 gigs, a FAT32 index, file index, couldn't track any more of the capacity of that disk. So you lost it or you had to do something else with it. And that's where we are even to this day. Microsoft, now it's changed a little bit because cluster size have changed, so we can use larger storage devices now. Go ahead. I see you got something.
So just a little clarification. The FAT32 limitation was that was a Microsoft Windows limitation, not a limitation of the technology. So if you had a FAT32, it could be a substantially bigger partition than just.
Quite right.
Yeah. So anyway.
But nonetheless, you still hit a wall at a certain size, and once you do, you can't take advantage of any more. And so if you're going to use a FAT system, and Raspberry Pi OS likes to start with a FAT system, I don't want to start with a FAT32 because I won't get the advantage of the entire capacity of my micro SD card. So if I go out and buy one of those gigantic 128 gigabit micro SD cards,
Gigabyte, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, then I might only get 32 gigabytes accessible on there with a FAT32 or whatever that limit is. And so there's a better, bigger FAT system called FAT64. So now we've got these 64-bit entries to track way more clusters and have
So-
much larger disks.
So the bottom line is, depending on the size of your micro SD card, you're going to want to use either FAT32 or FAT64.
Right. And nothing wrong with using FAT64 all the time.
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay.
And of course, the skinnier cards are exFAT, just, for the joke.
Well, FAT64 and exFAT are the same thing.
Right.
Okay. All right. So I want to take a look at building a Pi-hole. We know what it is. It's an ad blocker that uses DNS filtering. And what I've done is a little bit of advanced work, because this part takes about an hour. I took a shiny, fresh, new micro SD card, and I installed the current Raspberry Pi OS. Now, if you go to the website that makes Pi-hole and supports it, it's pi-hole.net. They're going to tell you that you should install Raspberry Pi OS Lite, and that's completely fine. And I think it's the right thing to do if you're going to make a box that's going to sit there and run as a dedicated Pi-hole box. But if you want to use it to do more experiments and things like that, then use the full-blown version of Raspberry Pi. They both, Raspberry Pi OS, they both take about the same amount of time to install. Excuse me.
Okay, so two separate operating system
Right,
options.
one's just a pared down version of the other.
Okay. All right, cool.
So that's what I did last night. I did a fresh install of Raspberry Pi OS.
Okay.
And then I did a couple very simple configuration things on it. I changed the name of the server. You can call it anything you want. I called mine, amazingly, Pi-hole. What a stunner.
Wow, the original.
The default installation will turn on one or both of your network interface cards. So if you have, when you do your install, a cable plugged into your NIC that's connected to the outside world through a switch, something to that effect. How did I get over there? That's a funky thing. Then your hardwired connection will work. If at the beginning of the installation, you selected to use Wi-Fi during the installation, then that will be enabled. So you're all set and ready to go. There we go. I'm sorry, I'm clicking around all over the place here trying to make my machine do what I want it to do. And in either case, DHCP is the standard setup there. And that's completely okay. The system, the installation of Pi-hole later is going to convert that to a static address. You need to have a static address for a DNS server. And when you get down to it, that's what this thing is. It's a specialized DNS server. So right now you're probably using I'm going to guess 90% of the installations of all of our viewers right now, your DNS server for your workstation is your default gateway, 192.168.1.1 or 0.1. And there really isn't a DNS server in there. What happens is we send a message, a DNS request to that machine, and it has firmware and then it says, oh, I see, I know what you were trying to do here. I don't have the answer for you, but I got a DNS server from my ISP. I'll forward that request on to the ISP's DNS server, and it'll get handled, and the responses will come back in exactly that same way. Let me show you something.
Okay.
He said, as if he could do it readily and easily.
I was very excited by that you switched to the Pi-hole.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that actually just before I went. So this is the one that doesn't let me advance. You're just lovely. Stop that one. Close that. Oh yeah, I see what happened. So I had to open a new shiny one to pull that off. There we go. Okay, this is the one that's advanceable. Yay. So this is your usual configuration for most home systems and small office systems. I type into a browser, www.iwantogohere.com, and it sends a DNS request to my normal default gateway, my Soho router, who in turn forwards it to either the ISP's DNS server, or maybe you've reprogrammed it and sent it to one of the world big public DNS servers. And the result comes back in exactly the same path. Stops off here. This guy is the one who actually sends me my answer with an IP address. So when we add a Pi-hole into the game, works a little differently. I'm going to configure the Pi-hole with a public DNS server, like Google's famous 8.8.8.8 or 8.8.4.4. And there's a whole list of them that you can select from when we do the install. And then I'm going to go into my host and I say, I no longer want you to make your DNS requests to 192.168.1.1. Your primary DNS server, your preferred, is now whatever this guy's IP address is going to be. So a DNS request goes into Pi-hole. Pi-hole sends it, doesn't stop here. He doesn't make a drop-off call at the gateway router. He calls out through the router, through the internet, to a public DNS server. Back comes the results. And then when you go to load that website, the website is going to call for all of its advertisers, and your system will make DNS requests for those, and the Pi-hole will say, nah, that's on my list. I'm not sending that back to you. No answer. So we don't even have to make the secondary call. And that's one thing that makes it just so blindingly fast. So this is what the whole concept looks like. So off we go.
Okay.
I'm going to share. This server looks exactly the same as the one that we had up earlier, but he's not. Let me get my little notes out here so I can talk about the things I want to talk about. Buzz, buzz, grind, grind. All right. So I mentioned it before, but I'm just going to pick up where I left off. To do this whole install from scratch takes about an hour and 10 minutes, give or take the speed of your connection. If you've already got an operating system, Raspberry Pi OS on some machine, take you 10 minutes. And it's a 3-step process. Install the OS, gather some information about the IP addresses that exist in your network right now that you're currently using, and plan the IP addresses that you're going to be using. And then you run this install, which is totally menu oriented. And if it wasn't me doing it for 40 minutes, you can do this in 5. I'll try to make it go a little bit quicker, or a lot quicker, before installing Pi-hole. So install the Raspberry Pi OS, use the light version if you like, use a full version if you like. If you're going to do it on a Raspberry Pi Zero, that thing's only got a ½ gig of RAM, use the light version.
Is there a way we can see what you're doing, Dave?
I'm not doing anything right now. You're just staring boringly as I'm heading through my notes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were.
I'll come to head here while I do that. So I'm just kind of reading some notes. I thought I'd read them quicker and we'd be able to click faster. But okay, so information that you've got to gather. And you don't have to do this in advance. You can say, oh, we're at that phase and I don't know the answer. Fine, stop and look it up. But you need to know at some point the IP address of your default gateway. Again, for most of you, it's probably 192.168.1.1 or 0.1. Some of you get a little more safety conscious and do something different, but you probably know it. You need to know what your local preferred DNS server is. You're going to find that either in the DHCP server of your Soho router, what it's passing out, or if you've got it manually configured in your computer, you can go look at the settings, and I'll show you that at the end of this. But again, for 90% of us, it's the same as the gateway router.
Okay.
Buzzing along. Got that, got that, got that. Now, in my system, and I think this is not uncommon for geeks, I have a preferred server, a preferred DNS server that is my gateway router. I'm happy with that. I don't anymore, but before I was playing with Pi-holes, yeah. So it would have been my gateway router, and I let it contact Comcast DNS server. And then I had a backup one. There's a preferred and a secondary in Windows. And my backup one was the Google, or one of the 2 Google public DNS servers. So if the Comcast DNS server ever goes down, then my machine will get the fail, hey, I'm not getting any DNS responses, so I'll go call Google. Okay. And I still have that even within Pi-hole land. My Pi-hole is my primary and Google Direct is my secondary. What's the downside of that? If Pi-hole is down and I wind up using native Google, well, then I'm not going to get any filtering on DNS-based ads.
Right.
That's life.
And you'll know that happened because then suddenly you'll be getting a bunch of ads.
Yes. The next thing you got to do is to plan the static IP address for your Pi-hole. And I want to show that. Most people have seen this, but if you haven't, it's important that you do.
Okay.
Second to wake it up.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is I'm right-clicking on my network connection in Windows, open network and internet settings. This keeps opening different windows, so I'm not going to have you follow along with me. I pick Ethernet from the left frame, and I'm going to select change adapter options in the right frame, and then I'm going to share.
Okay.
And I hope that it's not going to open up another window and make me have to reshare that, but I think it's every possibility that it does. So hopefully you've all seen a screen that looks like this in your computer at some point. This is my wired Ethernet connection. I'll right-click it and go to Properties. Can you see the Properties box open? Or are you still looking at what I showed you?
I see the Properties box open.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to go down here. You can single-click on Internet Protocol version 4 and then Properties, or you can double-click. It'll take you to the same menu. Can you see the new box that popped up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you can see I'm getting my IP address from a DHCP server, and I'm getting my DNS server address automatically. So we're going to change this at the very end to use the following DNS specific address. Let me kill out of there, and now I'm going to open up a different thing. Stop share. Close you, close you. Now I'm going to open up a browser tab, and I'm going to browse to my Soho router.
All right.
I can share that with you. I have no secrets from my friends. So I'm using my Brave browser over here. IP address of my router is 192.168.1.1.
Now we know the secret name.
The appropriate account name and password, which Brave kindly remembers for me. And I'm gonna go down here to LAN. Really, I am. Oh, there we go. And I'm gonna look at the DHCP server. This is gonna give me my scope. Scope means the list of IP addresses that it hands out to clients that request one. So as I look in here, the scope, here's the starting address. It says the very first address that I would give out would be 192.168.1.100. And the last one that I'd give out is 192.168.1.75. So as long as I pick an IP address that's outside of that range, I won't generate a conflict with anything that this thing might auto assign. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
I have picked one in my head. I picked 192.168.1.201. You got to remember that because I won't.
All right, 201. I got you.
201.
And I'll write it down because, you know.
Sweet.
Gotta find my red pen, of course.
I remember it. It's okay. I've been doing it all night. My installation, I was doing a fresh installation, started yesterday morning, and it was causing me trouble until about 6 o'clock at night when I finally realized, oh, here's the problem. And I fixed the problem. It was a loose physical cable on the switch. Then everything started going like a dream. But
Plug it in, Dave. Plug it in.
yeah, and it's not like I hadn't been doing pie holes all week. That was just going to be, okay, here's the last one. Get ready for class. Okay. I'm not even going to follow my notes here because this is so simple. Anybody can do this. So let me share out.
You're ready.
We are. I'm ready.
Alice is following along with her pie in real time, by the way.
You can. All right. So this is a fresh, shiny, brand spanking new install of Raspberry Pi OS. It's on a 3B. I've changed the server name. I've enabled SSH and VNC, and that's it. That's all I've done to this machine. So the first thing I want to do is open up a browser. Good thing I used the 3B where the browser comes up in 27 seconds, huh? By the way, there's only one thing in here that takes a long time, and that's 2 minutes. So I'll come back to head when we do this. I don't need to see the Adobe Flash Player message. So I'm just going to go to Pi-hole, pi-hole.net. And this will, of course, take me to the main page. Not much information on here, but there's the one piece that we need. Here's how to install it if you're going to use a Docker system. We're not. Here's the platforms that can be installed on. And here's number 2, install a Pi-hole. Okay, I'm going to click that. It's going to open up a new tab to GitHub. Oh, no, it's not. It's their own Git. I didn't realize that. Okay, something new. Yes, it's still a blank page. All right, so here's a list of all the files and things that are going to be involved with it. I scrolled too fast. But I don't need those. Just underneath that list of files, call it about a third of the way down the page, it says here, one-step automated install. Now they give us 3 different methods to do it, and I'm going to do a session in the next couple of weeks about 4 methods to install stuff on your machine. But we're going to use the simplest, quickest, easiest one. This one is the least secure. It's a little bit controversial to use this method, but I trust Pi-hole.org, so I'm comfortable with this. So I'm just going to highlight that command, and I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to open up a bash terminal. I haven't resized all the fonts and everything on here, and I want to do that real time. Let's make it monospaced bold, and I think we've tried this in sizes in the 20s.
Yeah, that's my memory of it.
Select, okay.
Yeah, that looks good.
And you see this. Okay.
Yeah.
So all I got to do is paste that command onto the command line here. Curl means go out to a website and pull in all of the stuff that you find on that page. Do it securely. Here's the page where to get it, and then pipe the script that it finds there through the bash terminal. Again, I'll explain that all when we do a full thing here. And he goes buzz, 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 grind, grind, grind. He does a couple of moments of checking things and installing some basic things. Here's the 2 minutes that's going to take a moment. I'm going to leave this up so you can see it. This line scared me because it sat there the very first time I did it for a long time, or a relatively long time. And you can see it happened really quick on there. And the reason was I was doing this by Wi-Fi yesterday, which is much slower than my connection when I had it physically wired. So things are moving much more quickly now. Going to get past this 2 minutes in nothing flat. And the only thing we care about here is errors. And if you get any errors, it's going to stop. And then we got to start troubleshooting. But I looked on Raspberry Pi forum recently to see who's done this and who's had any problems. There are very few reports of problems. So this kind of menu is a very common type of Linux menu. It only works with a keyboard. We enter when there's okays and no's and cancels. And when there's options up on high, we mark them with space bars and we move through them with arrow keys. So I'm going to get 3 pages here of advertising. This thing is going to turn you into an ad blocker. And it's free, but here's where you can send money. Enter on OK. The Pi-hole is a server, so it needs a static address to function properly. Down the road, it's going to tell us how to deal with that, because currently it says I'm using DHCP settings. That's cool. Enter on OK. So here's our first choice. Which one do you want to use? Since I have 2 active, I can arrow down to the wireless one and use the space bar to select it. Arrow back up to the wired. ETH0 is your wired network. And that's what I want on here. To get down into the lower menus, you use the tab key. Once I've tabbed, I can use arrows back and forth here. If you cancel any of these menus, nothing will happen. Nothing bad, nothing that you've selected happens. You just get to start over at the beginning. So it's pretty mistake proof. So I'm going to enter on OK. And now it says, which public DNS server do you want to pick? So if you're familiar with any of these and you're happy with them, knock yourself out. I'm a Google guy, at least when it comes to this. So with this one, I could just enter on Google. You see there's no selector box next to it, and that'll take me to the next screen, or I can just highlight the one that I want and use the tab key. I'm tabbing back here. So I'm going to highlight on Google, tab to the OK key, and enter. Now there's two lists of filters that come with Raspberry Pi. You can make your own, you can change these lists, but by default, use them both. So they're already both highlighted and ready to rock, selected. I'll tab and enter on the OK key. You want to do this for IPv4 only, IPv6 only, or both? Certainly both, especially on a Pi, because Pi uses IP6 much more effectively than Windows does. Tab to the OK key, enter. What's your, well, it says, do you want to use your current network settings as a static address? I don't. 192.168.1.156 falls within the scope of my DHCP server. It's between 100 and 175. I do want to use that gateway, 192.168.1.1, but I don't want to use this IP address because when I stop that won't stop the DHCP server from giving it to somebody else. So I'm going to say no here, and I'm going to put in a different static address, 201. And it'll be a WAC 24, standard class C subnet address. If you're not into Network Plus yet and you haven't gotten into subnet masks, just accept 24, you're going to be happy, or whatever they offer. Tab to OK. So that's going to be my new static IPv4 address. What do you want for your default gateway to be? Same. That one's completely fine. It should be 192.168.1.1. Tab to OK. You get a chance to change your mind. If you blew it somewhere and you go to no, you would start over again just at that point. It wouldn't take you all the way back to the beginning of this. So yeah, these settings are correct. You want to install the web administration interface? Absolutely, right? We're web people. We use GUIs. The command line is a long and painful learning curve, and it's still there for you if you'd rather use it. So yes, I want web admin interface on. I tab to OK and enter. And well, then you need a web server. You want to install this little basic one we have? Yes, it's quick, it's simple, it does the job. So yes, got to have it, it's recommended. You want to log your queries? Now that's up to you. You know, if the cops are going to come knocking at your door because of places that you visit, maybe you want to say no. If you want to track what the kids are doing at 3 o'clock in the morning and sites they're going to, yeah. So I'm turning mine on. Now, this is a privacy mode. If you Google Pi-hole privacy mode, you'll get a long explanation here. But basically, we're going to get a statistics page on the administration page, and this tells me what statistics will be tracked. You can change this anytime after the fact. So I'm going to show everything. And now it's happening. All of those selections that we made are coming down. I'm going to need a pen because I'm going to write something down here that will be kind of important. When this little joggly stuff gets done, minute or so, it's going to present another page that looks like the ones that we've been on. That's the I'm finished page. And on that page is going to be a case-sensitive password that you need to log in when you go to the administration menu. If you blow it, I forgot it, I missed it. When I did my last install last night, I accidentally bumped a key on the keyboard and that screen went away before I could write the password down. Good news, you can just open up a terminal and there's a simple little command to run to reset the password to whatever you want, including a blank password if you like. So it's not a panic if you miss this. Okay, this is the 2-minute thing. Staying here.
Pretty exciting screen too.
Yeah, right. So I remember making notes on this thing. You're going to see a whole bunch of lines here that say creating config file, creating config file. But if you notice, they're all different.
It makes for scintillating reading, Dave.
Yeah, it's kind of like watching the Washing Machine movie. A lot of action, but no plot.
Right. So while this is rolling, Tellwood has a question about how much space does Pi-hole take up on a card?
Man, nothing. You can do this on an 8 gig card. It takes about 8 gigs to do Raspberry Pi with everything now. So 16 is more than fine. In fact, that's what this one is on.
Okay, so let's do another one as well, because Alice has a question.
Yep.
Apparently she got an error message while trying to follow along that said, could not update local repository.
Okay, so you have a repository problem, and I don't remember, there's a fixed repository pair of commands that you can do. So what I would do, a short answer, and I can give you a longer one. Scott will copy paste and save that one for me, and I can do this next Friday. But just do Google on Raspberry Pi and then that exact message in quotes, and you will find a pair of commands that will fix, your local repository. That's a very common thing that happens during all kinds of installs. It's not just tied to this. Well, that sucks. You're all ready to go at the end of this thing, and I'm going to turn on Pi-hole. Ah, rats, it won't finish installing while Dave's doing it. Enabling Light PD service to start on reboot. It'll work. Creating a user called Pi-hole. No dashes. Installing the blocking pages. So those two files, this is one of the really nice things about them. When Pi-hole is running, they get installed into memory. So we don't have to refer to the micro SD card, which is obviously much slower than RAM. And that's one of the things that makes Pi-hole so fast. Anybody know any good songs? How's the vermicelli game in your town? Hope that's not. Hey, and we're there. So first thing I'm going to do is write this down. 1 lowercase c, capital L, lower U, Q, F, cap A, and small o. It tells us that there's an installation log over in Etsy Pi-hole, and the name of it is called pi-hole.log. And then this is the most important thing that we're going to need to know, how to get into the administration page. So it's pi.hole whack admin or the IP address that we assign to it. You can do that on this machine, or you can do that on any machine of your network. So I can remember that. So I'm going to enter on OK. It's done. It's running. How freaking cool is that? Well, let's prove it. Kind of, sort of. So I'm now going to go and change my settings. I'll bring you there with me when I get there.
Okay. I'm just laughing at the jokes flying. All good.
There's so many jokes about Pi-hole. How do you? It's just such a great phrase.
Yeah, Debbie started it. She's like, all these really interesting new phrases that we have to learn. Like, jokes. Yeah.
Okay, I'm at a page where I can share with you quickly without having to go through all the hobbledyjunk. Okay, so instead of now getting my IP address, my DNS preferred server from the DHCP server, I'm going to say your preferred DNS server from now on is 192.168.1.201. And if it's ever down, how about 8.8.4.4? That's the backup DNS server over at Google. Okay it. Okay it. Close out of that menu. Now I can't do this. I have a technical problem. In order for those changes to affect themselves, I have to do an ipconfig release followed by an ipconfig renew. Whenever you make changes to your network card configuration on Windows, you have to do a release and renew. What's going to happen when I do ipconfig release?
Bye, Dave.
I'm going to lose all the IP addresses of all the devices in my computer, and I'm going to pop offline. but that's what you have to do. So let me show you one final thing now. If it was working, let's say that I actually did that. I'm going to take you back now to the Pi-hole server. Really, I am. Click this. And this. And this. I'm not going to do this on the Pi-hole server. I'm going to do this in Windows because it doesn't matter. You can do this on the Pi-hole server. You can do this anywhere you want. So I'm going to open up a browser tab. And I'm going to share that with you. Hearing me. Got one more minute of presentation, then I'm going to catch up on questions with you. I'm going to go to 192.168.1.201 / admin. And this is the administrative screen. So 15 queries have happened already. That's just background tasks that's going on in the Raspberry Pi because I'm not doing anything within there. None of them have been blocked. There's 82,000 on the block list. And you'll see over time, the block list and the queries list and everything will happen over here. To administer it and make changes to it, which is what we're going to do next week, you'll hit this login. You'll use that password that you copied down. 1CLUQF capital AO. Log in. So I can see things without logging in, but I can't change things. But hopefully you can see now that I've got a much more expansive list of things that I can do over here. I can look at logs. I can create my own blacklist or block list or white lists. And one of the really, really, really cool things that they've introduced with this newest version, this just came out in May, is you can do individual control for any host on your network. This block list for this person, that block list for that person, this menu, whatever. It's really powerful and it's really sophisticated and it's really slick. So that, my friends, is installing a Pi-hole. It's quick, it's painless, unless you have problems with your local repository. Very sorry about that, Alice. I'll come over and work on it.
Just a quick jaunt across the pond.
Yeah, well, no, she's here in the States. She's from Italy, but I think she said LA right now or New York. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. All right, so I'm where that message was over at 344.
Yeah, and she just posted that she was able to update the repository and moving on to finish the install. So
yeah,
7 minutes. You have time. You can do it.
Oh, you should be arrested for the suppository repository line.
Oh, but it's the next one that's funnier. Ian's comment. That's the one where I lost it.
Thanks.
That's the one where I lost it. Yeah.
Brendan sent you an email longer than normal, so that's on you. Yep. What do you got? You've been following along. Where do I want to go?
There haven't been any questions that I've seen. People are just following along, basically.
Good. All right. Well, we kicked it then.
Oh, wait. Kevin has a question at 324 that we jumped over, I think.
Okay.
Which is Canapi.
Kevin is orange.
Canapi.
Sometimes I just look at colors.
Pi.
Okay, yeah. So Kevin, you asked a related question on the Wednesday AMA. You asked about a honeypot. I haven't started the research on that, but here's the trick. My suspicion is yes, as long as you don't include another process that uses port 53 or port 80, because Pi-hole needs both of those, then you can put other stuff on there. I know people who have created 4 function boxes, that are all these kind of housekeeping boxes. They're IPS, intruder detection systems, and intruder protection systems and things like that on there. So it's going to depend on the honeypot. And I've got that on my list of things to research, making honeypots and honey nets on a Pi. So my guess is, again, yes, as long as it's not using any conflicting ports. For that same reason, you wouldn't want to try and make this a real DNS server or even a DHCP server. Those cause problems. So I've read.
All right, excellent.
I like that. 326, Alice Ponzi trying to follow you in real time on my Pi, and you have. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And she's in Milan, by the way.
Okay. There was somebody whose international presence here. And then when we followed up, they were in the States. So I thought that was Allie. My apologies. Alice.
Now,
Thank
Alice,
you.
you have a new nickname, whether you wanted to or not.
Updated the Pi. I see that. Milan. All right. Well, we got through all the questions. We got through the stuff. We did 2 of the 3 things today. So I'm going to move basic bash scripting to next week. And that actually kind of works pretty well for me. Not sure when Scott is leaving. We haven't talked about it yet, but he may or may not be here. I may or may not work solo. May grab Michael Smyer or somebody like that. We'll see how it all goes. We're going to play it by ear through the week. And whatever happens on Friday, you'll see it happen on Friday. But now I definitely have 2 things to do: basic bash scripting and Pi-hole administration, which isn't too deep and too painful. And I'm not even going to script it. We're just going to go through that administrative menu, and I'm going to show you how to change the password if you ever forget or lose it.
Okay, awesome. And then hopefully we can also hear from Alice on her success and other people who are doing the Pi-hole, including
Right.
me.
So this is really simple. Watch it. If you're catching at the end of this thing and man, I missed Pi-hole day, it's archived. Look at it. It's simple. And again, all you really need to know is to go to piehole.net, click that install button, and it takes you to the GitHub, copy the curl line, paste it in, and answer the questions. So the install itself could not be much more simple. The only thing more simple is if it made all the right guesses and did it for you, but you want to customize this. I found also a really cool article that says, hey, I built this and now I'm moving locations. I'm changing ISPs. I want to, the office made me take it out of the office and I have to take it home. So how do I adjust this for a new environment with new IP addresses? And again, it's a really simple 2-3 step process. You do it all on the admin page, change this address, change that address, and it's done. So it's a really useful and easy thing to move.
Very cool. Very cool. Now this is exciting. This has been like a whole series of each week we keep doing these really cool things with the Pi, and that we could also do on other machines too. So it's not just restricted to a Pi, just the Pi is $35. So,
Exactly.
it's pretty awesome.
At 356, they said it was tiny. Dave's on a 16 gig card. If you do this with Raspberry Pi OS Lite, that goes fine on half of an 8 gig card, and this would use the other half. It doesn't save files or anything like that, so you're not going to be constantly growing it. So if you go total light mode, then you could do this on an 8. But Raspberry never recommends anything smaller than 8.
And they're not that expensive. So
Right.
Alice wants us to go for another 2 hours.
Yeah, me too. Love this stuff. Friday night, dinner with the wife. Love you, Alice. Love the wife more.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the last of these questions here. We got about 2 minutes. That worked out beautifully and perfectly.
And I'm going to post
a Pi today. Well, you should, Terrence. Way to go, man. My goal is to ruin Scott at least once per stream. Very nice.
Awesome.
I think there'll be a 16 gig Pi. Yeah, I do. Wonderful question to ask Dr. Upton when he joins us in 2 weeks. He won't answer it. They never give away what's coming, but nobody expected an 8. Nobody expected a 4. So they introduce a 1, a 4, and an 8 all at the same time. Heck yeah, I expect a 16 down road.
Yeah, so I'm gonna.
Yeah. Do you need it? Sorry, go ahead.
So I'm gonna post the specials for the week in case anybody joined us late.
Okay, yep, I'll throw them up real quick.
Sure. So just for being here in the AMA with Dave and myself and a cast of characters, we have study tools for you. The special this week is 50% off the A+ and Network Plus super bundles. That's the videos, practice exams, and the simulations, and 50% off the Security Plus video and Total Tester bundle. So just use the code MMLive Labor Day at checkout at www.totalsim.com, and you will get an incredible deal on incredible tools for A+, Net+, for
I'll
security.
throw this up one last time. It's not going to be up there long enough for you to remember, but it's on the archive, so you can always look again. Dave R at TotalSim.com, Scott J at TotalSim.com. Write us. Or else.
Right.
All right. Any last questions? Because hey, it just hit. Never more. We're done with questions. It is on the hour right now. Michael Smyer is in the control room with his finger over the big red button. So until Mike's show on Monday again and Wednesday, and then until we're back here on the 11th, next Friday, you all have a great and wonderful and safe weekend. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye. And now we have the awkward moment where we're staring at the
Yeah, I
camera.
know. I was trying to decide if I should be still or